Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this latest Arizona Capital Times Morning Scoop. Our subject today, very important, saving water, securing the future, city conservation efforts. If you'd like to get involved at any point, please use the Q&A function. We'll try to get to as many questions over the course of the next hour as we can. I'm your host today, Steve Goldstein. Distinguished panel of experts with us today. Max Wilson, the City of Phoenix Water Resources Management Advisor. Lauren Hickson from the town of Gilbert, she's the Water Resources Manager. And Amanda Lacey is the City of Surprise Water Resources Supervisor. Before we get into our broader panel discussion, first want to welcome Terry Goddard, CAP Board President, for some introductory remarks. Terry, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks to everybody for watching this morning scoop on water. We at CAP are very pleased to be able to sponsor this discussion on how our local municipalities are doing such an incredible job in finding ways to conserve our most precious resource, our water. They have an amazing record, and I think you probably have already heard the little fact, but it bears repeating that today in Arizona, we're using less water per capita than we did in 1950 with a much, much smaller population. And that's an amazing feat. It's one that I think we should be justly proud of, but there's a long way to go. We at CAP are involved in two kinds of conservation. One is what we're discussing today, and the other is trying to find ways to save additional water in Lake Mead so that the Colorado River, as it runs lower and lower, does not run out. And over the last decade, we've put 4.1, I believe, or 4.6 million acre feet of water saved in Lake Mead. And that means the lake is today 100 feet higher than it would have been had we not made those efforts. But the bottom line is there's less water in the Colorado, much less water. Our groundwater is stressed, and the need for conservation at every level has never been greater. So I hope you find today's experts inspiring. They are leading the charge in terms of making sure that we do as much to get every drop of water gets used and reused and used again. It's a cycle. It's exciting. I just want to add one little item from the CAP's version. If you go to Water Use It Wisely website and put in your zip code, it will show all the different water conservation methods you can participate in your area. And I hope you'll do that soon. And you'll hear a lot more about it in this panel discussion on experts in what our cities are doing to make water more plentiful than it is and to take every drop and use it over and over. Thank you so much for being here and for caring about water in Arizona.
Terry, thank you. We'll hear from you a little bit later on in the conversation. Good to hear from you. Max, let me start with you. And I think Terry stole your thunder a little bit because I wanted to ask you about how water demand has changed specifically in the Phoenix area over the past number of decades. If you can get into that, the numbers that Terry talked about, and also how it reached that point, because some people are still absolutely stunned when you hear something like, wait a second, we're using less water than 1950. There are many, many, many more people here now.
Oh, it's okay, Stephen. Thanks, Mr. Goddard, for those opening remarks. This is actually my favorite thing to talk about, so I'm happy to talk about it as many times as you'd like. So I think when most people imagine water demand in the city of Phoenix and in the Valley more broadly, they imagine that with all this growth that we've seen over my lifetime, that we just simply must be using much, much, much more water than we were a few years ago. And that's actually, in fact, not the case. In the city of Phoenix in particular, our water demand peaked in about 2008, and to this day, we still use less water in total than we did in the year 2000 across the entire city, despite all the growth that we've seen. The reason why that's possible specifically is because of our residents. It's the individual conservation actions that they have taken over that time period that has allowed us to significantly reduce per person water usage and really make sure that we're getting the most out of every single drop we can access. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to sit on our laurels and not continue moving forward, not continue finding new sources as well as new ways to continue to reduce water use overall. But it's an incredible accomplishment. It's frankly something we should be very proud of.
Thank you, Max. Lauren, I'll go back to that subject with Max a little bit later. But for you, my first question is specifically about Gilbert. How does Gilbert track your water savings in the overall landscape of what you're doing there?
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, everyone. So for Gilbert, we have been tracking our water savings for about a decade, and each year we put out a water conservation scorecard that shows quantified savings for each of our programs. And how we do that is we track what the water use was pre our engagement with our customers and then post engagement with our customers. So we look at 12 months prior to, say, our water efficiency checkups with our residents, and then 12 months after, and see what that difference is to quantify those savings. So we've seen a lot of success in tracking those savings and being able to quantify the efficacy of these programs, and then use that to not just showcase to our customers that these programs are working, but also then advocate to council and leadership, hey, these are the programs that we need, and this is how much water they save. And this is how we can get more support to grow those programs and essentially grow our savings.
Great. Okay. Amanda, let's get you on here as well. Surprises Conservation Program. Obviously, we're going to think about being newer than other cities. How did the city go about starting it, and what sort of progress can you tell us about how the city of Surprise has made so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, everyone. So the City of Surprise on this panel represents the little guy. I think we're a fairly newer utility in comparison. And when our utility first started, our water conservation requirements were met by participating in regional efforts, the Water Use It Wisely campaign, and public outreach events. And it was mostly about engagement and just kind of getting out to events and trying to get public engagement through education. In 2019, so just a few years ago, we hired our first water conservation specialist. And we're very proud of the relationships we've built, and we're very proud of being able to rely on those relationships. And so our conservation specialist has been able to reach out to our neighbors and really ask the questions. I want to start a rebate program. How do I do that? I want to plant a xeriscape garden at City Hall. What's the best way? And so relying on our partners like Lauren and Max to help us build a program has really helped us kind of come into our own as a city. And we've been able to bring on rebate programs and data-driven programs that I think are really on par with the rest of the Valley. So I think that we've done a good job catching up fairly quickly.
Before I go to another question that I planned, I like the partnership concept of that. Max, can I ask you about that when it comes to, we always, I think a lot of people who are viewing right now think about competition, or they think about how cities are trying to, I want to get this particular business to come to my city. I want to get it instead of yours. But when it comes to water conservation, how much of that is rich with the idea of where cities really can collaborate?
Well, fundamentally, I think here across the Valley, we're all in this together. At the end of the day, it's a shared set of resources that we're all able to access. And ultimately, I'll speak for myself. In my lifetime as a Valley resident, I was born in Phoenix. I lived in Tempe when I was in college. I moved to Scottsdale for a little while. I'm back in Phoenix now. And it was important at all of those different steps that I had that same culture of conservation with me everywhere that I went. And I think that that's a really important element that we've been able to build here in Phoenix through programs like Water Use It Wisely, through groups like Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, to help make sure that all of our Valley cities are giving that same message about the importance of conservation, so that we have a broader shared set of values rather than a city by city specific approach.
Lauren, have you found that to be the case as well, that the cities are really helping each other out when it comes to this issue?
Absolutely. Much as what Amanda has said and Max has said, we really rely on that collaboration to really understand what has been successful in one city, what can be changed to make it more successful moving forward. And then that communication piece, having that similar message is just critical so that it's not confusing when you are a resident of Chandler or Gilbert or Surprise. You really understand that this is a regional issue and a regional need.
Terrific. I want to remind people who are watching right now that you can send in a question for any of our panelists. We'll be looking at them and trying to work on as many as we can over the next 50 minutes or so. Again, just use the Q&A function and send your question to us. Lauren, let me stick with you on this. What is the town of Gilbert's most successful conservation mechanism or approach as you see it to this point?
So for Gilbert, we are a predominantly single-family residential community, and now we are 90% built out. With that being said, 60 to 70% of our water use is all outdoors, right? And so that water does not return to the sewer, can't be reused. It's an important use to use water outdoors to have a livable landscape, but we don't want to have waste outdoors, right? So a lot of that 60 to 70% of outdoor water use, we've seen up to 50% of that can be wasted through just inefficient watering too much. And so we found the most success in educating our customers how to water their existing landscapes correctly. We can see, 50% reduction just from educating about how to water what they currently have correctly. And then also advocating for more desert-friendly landscapes. So all of our programs are really focused on that outdoor water use because that's where we can see the most savings. We have a really great landscape water budget program for HOAs and businesses. It's award-winning, and we map actually all the landscapes for our HOAs and show them what their water budget needs to be. And then they can track it each month and see how much they're using and see if they're within budget. And I believe we've seen over 300 million gallons of savings from those programs year to year. It's just that critical piece of an HOA being able to see, this is how much we are using, this is how much we actually need to use. And that's also really helpful in helping them save money as well.
I think this applies to all of you, but Lauren, let me ask you just a really quick follow-up, which is that this is going to sound silly, but as someone who has an English degree and is not as data-driven, it's obvious that it's so vitally important when it comes to conservation and programs all of you are working on to actually give people true numbers and not just say, well, if you do this, we think it's going to do this. And I think that's interesting about what you said about the HOA. Again, I'm sure it applies to all the programs, but it's really, this is not just, hey, we think this might work. Here is actually how it's actively working.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can map out, this is your low water use landscaping. This is how much we project based on ET, temperature, precipitation. And then this is what your actual use is, and compare that. And then we also award those HOAs that are within 120% of their budget. We designate them as water wise, acknowledge them at a council meeting, really try to promote that and help them educate their residents on how they're managing their landscapes well.
And Max, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think the program that Lauren's describing there, the HOA program, is actually an incredible example of that collaboration that we were talking about a moment ago. So Gilbert really led the way in launching those HOA water budget programs. There's a longstanding conservation worker in Gilbert, Jeff Lee, who really spearheaded a lot of that work early on. And in seeing how well it went, I think almost every Valley City runs essentially an identical program at this time. And so what's so fun about working in conservation in Phoenix is because we have so many different cities that are all taking these slightly different approaches, we can go try everything, figure out what works, bring that back to the group, and then copy, frankly, the stuff that works well in other communities and bring them to our own. So it's been a great spirit of collaboration.
Max, as long as you're speaking, why don't you keep going until give us an idea? I know Phoenix probably has a very long list, having been doing this for a long time, but what are your most successful conservation mechanisms at this point?
I have a kind of odd perspective on this, to be honest, and that is that there are kind of two types of conservation programs. There are conservation programs that are easy to count, and there are conservation programs that are hard to count. And by that, I mean count how much water savings that you get. In conservation programs that are easy to count, obviously we see grass incentives racking up water savings very, very quickly. We can track very easily who's gone through the program, who hasn't gone through the program. I also would point out, as I said a moment ago, our HOA efficiency consultation program is probably our single most cost-effective mechanism for generating countable water savings. However, most of the water savings that we're seeing that are driving that GPCD curve is not that's gallons per capita per day, the per person water usage that I was talking about, is not things that are coming in directly from our programs. It's not somebody came in, they went through our grass incentive program, and we can see their gallons per person per day changing. It's rather that they're reacting to, I think, a lot of the messaging that we're putting out. It's that they're reacting to instances, a lot like these conversations that we're having right now. They're seeing the kind of norms around landscaping change. When I was a kid, it was really common in Phoenix for people to have grass front and backyards. It was kind of cool to have a grass front and backyard. I don't think it's cool to do that anymore. And frankly, I think that those aggregate changes over time have actually made a bigger difference overall. But what's challenging about that for cities and for the state as well is how do we tell that story? That slowly over a period of decades, we built a culture of conservation that convinced people that doing the right thing, that helping your water go as far as possible, has gotten us all of these conservation benefits without the heavy-handed mechanisms that we've seen a lot of other states and communities need to implement.
Amanda, specifically to Surprise, what's something that has you excited about what the group has done so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So with conservation savings, again, our program being a little bit newer, we maybe don't have as much of that removal of grass and how much did that save in water, and being able to do those long-term trends. We're starting to build those because we're just now starting our programs. But what we have seen be really successful is we have full conversion into advanced metering infrastructure, so AMI infrastructure. And what the City of Surprise has done, and I feel is pretty revolutionary for us, was we took our utility billing field team, and instead of being meter readers, we turned them into leak specialists. Our AMI system has an online software program that allows residents to see their daily water use down to the hour even, and they can see when those leaks come in. And so every single day, our utility billing field techs come in, they pull a list of leak alerts. So how many customers are seeing continuous consumption leaks, or possibly residents who have spikes, and they go out every single day. They divide and conquer. They divvy up those leak alerts between all of our utility billing techs, and they go to those homes, they knock on the door, and they say, hey, we found an increase in use in your water. Can we check? And they check, is it inside or is it outside? Is it that outdoor use that maybe we can give them information to look at one of our programs? Are you looking at conversion? Do you have issues in your irrigation? Maybe you can take one of our classes. Or if it's an indoor leak, they can help identify, is it a toilet flapper? Is it something really easy? Or they can provide those brochures and that education. In 2024, we had about 2,500 continuous consumption investigations. And we had about 1,300 leak investigations where a customer called us and said, hey, I saw that, or I got a notification, or I got a text message that said, I have a leak. I don't know what's going on. Can you come check it out? And that is really, really impactful, because when you think about it, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was, let me get my water bill at the end of the month. Why is my consumption so high? Why did it spike? And so then you spend a lot longer trying to identify those problems. And we have now made it instantaneous, and we've made it so that daily water efficiency can happen and that conservation can happen in real time.
Terrific. We have a few questions from the audience, and Max, I want to work one of these in based on what you said, the most recent one that came in from Sarah. Can you address the impact on the heat island effect from xeriscaping over removal of lawns? Is xeriscaping as effective as lawns in reducing heat island effects? Obviously, that takes us into a broader discussion where people can we have more shade? How does water use affect that? I'm someone who, like you, grew up here. I was lucky enough to grow up in a house that did have grass in the front and the back. We had irrigation in our neighborhood, but I know that has changed, and the need for things and people's awareness has changed as well. But can you address that idea, the idea of how is it going to make this area hotter, and does that bring up other challenges not necessarily related to water conservation?
100%. And I guess I would start by saying that, our goal as people who are living here in the desert should be to have a thriving, vibrant community that we all want to live in, right? We do not need to apologize for living in the desert. People have been living in deserts for a very, very, very long time. And we all want to make sure that we have a lifestyle here that supports what our kids want to do, that they can go outside and play, that they can enjoy the summer to the extent that that is a possible thing to do here. And a critical part of that is being able to stay cool. What we have found through our heat office that we have here in the city, we were the first to found a heat office in the nation, is that as long as you're doing that xeriscape conversion, you're continuing to bring shade into the landscape, you can actually reduce the amount of felt heat at a greater rate than grass itself. So if you think about it this way, if you had to go stand in an empty grass yard way out in the sun in the middle of the summer, your feet might feel a little bit cool, but your face is going to feel really, 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 really miserable. Compare that to sitting under a nice big mesquite tree or something like that in the shade on a xeriscape landscape. You'll feel a lot cooler in the shade. And so what we encourage folks to do as they make these conversions is to make sure that they're thinking about what kind of landscape do they want? What kind of lifestyle do they want? Where is that shade going to be most important for them so that they can maximize it and get the most out of every drop of water that we have?
Amanda, Lauren, do you guys want to comment on that based on what your cities are doing there? Amanda, go
Yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. So for our turf conversion rebate program, we actually have a canopy coverage requirement. So we still require about 30% canopy coverage in the space that you're converting. And so if it's your backyard and you're removing and you want to remove the grass, then we still look at that and we say, hey, yep, you've got some trees, you've got some shrubs, you're providing that shade. And so we've done that intentionally to help with that.
Great. And Lauren, what about you?
Likewise, we are always advocating when you're removing grass that we're putting in desert-friendly landscapes with good plant canopy coverage and those shade trees, especially. With our residential grass removal program, we add an extra incentive to the payout if they have that 30% plant canopy coverage and also have trees. So that is critical to making sure that it's still a livable environment. We're not trying to make it barren. We're trying to make it livable, but we don't need grass to make it livable. We need shade trees.
Members of the audience who've just joined us, want to remind you this is the Saving Water, Securing the Future City Conservation Efforts Morning Scoop presented by the Arizona Capitol Times. Our panelists are Max Wilson, City of Phoenix Water Resources Management Advisor, Lauren Hickson, Town of Gilbert Water Resources Manager, and Amanda Lacey, City of Surprise Water Resources Supervisor. Max, I want to start with you on this, and I want all three of the panelists to discuss it. When we talked earlier about water demand in Phoenix and how that amazingly has changed and gone down over the past 7 or 8 decades, how have innovations in technology had an impact on that? You talked about how, yes, individual actions by residents, obviously vitally important, but how has technology affected this?
Well, I think it's an immense part of the story, frankly. So we really see two things happening simultaneously. One, we see people changing their landscapes outside. That's making a big difference in their water use overall. But then inside the house, we see technology making an enormous difference in how people are using water. So for example, when I was born in the 1980s, the average get toilet was doing about 3.5 gallons per flush. I just remodeled my house a couple of years ago. The toilets I put in are less than a gallon per flush, and they work just fine. They're just a toilet. It's a normal toilet that does all the things that a normal toilet should do. So every single time that we flush a toilet in my house, we're saving almost 3 gallons of water. And that's an incredible level of efficiency change that we've seen all across the industry, not just in toilets, but in shower heads and faucets, and really making sure that folks are able to get the same level of service. They're getting that same quality when they're taking a shower. They're getting that same quality when they're washing their hands, but not using as much water as they go.
Yeah. Lauren, you want to jump in on the technology point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as much as we can reduce the barriers for people to conserve and make it less, energy intensive, cognitive, for someone to engage, right, the better, right? So with the toilets, with the faucets, with washing machines, but also with AMI, that is a huge thing that Amanda brought up. Gilbert is also going system-wide AMI with our water meters. We're about halfway through it right now, but we were monitoring that continuous consumption on about 6,000 meters for 2023, and we were able to save 43 million gallons for our customers from that monitoring, from alerting them to those leaks. Some of those customers had leaks up to 1,500 gallons per hour for years on end. And the problem is that water is just seeping into the ground and they're not seeing it. And if they don't see that change from one bill to the next, they think it's normal. And so again, if we can alert them, give them the technology to see their water use on an hourly basis, it's easier for them to engage. It's easier for them to understand. One other piece of technology I'll mention is smart irrigation controllers. Those are the controllers that are turning on and off your irrigation, turning on and off your sprinklers in your backyard. And we have launched a rebate program for weather-based irrigation controllers. So they're changing the irrigation of your yard based on the actual temperature, actual precipitation. And that again takes that off the resident to have to make changes to their irrigation controller based on the weather. So again, if we can just reduce those barriers for the community, that just helps conservation be part of the day-to-day and not something everyone has to actively engage in every single moment.
Okay. Amanda, what about you? Tech innovation?
Absolutely. I think I'm going to wind up parroting a little bit of what everyone has said here. So our AMI conversion has obviously been our biggest kind of water savings and conservation effort. The program that Lauren had mentioned earlier that maps out landscapes for HOAs or commercial properties and provides that kind of real-time ET and the weather-based data. The irrigation timers, we also do irrigation timer rebates and trying to get those smart innovations. And us, again, being kind of a newer city, we've got a lot of new homes, a lot of new builds going in. And the builders and the developers here are really pushing that, smart home and water smart homes and really putting things in the house that are going to help residents save and conserve that water. And so it's what drives not only data collection and allows us to prove water savings, but it gives residents and customers real-time data, things that they can use and see.
And Steve, I think both Amanda and Lauren said something really important there that we just should pause for a second and highlight, which is the idea that it's not the cities themselves who are saving water, it's the customers who are saving water. Fundamentally, it is what our role is to make it as easy as possible for you as the customer to do the things that you want to do, to make sure that you have the landscape that you want, that it's irrigated in an efficient way. Nobody wants to waste money because they're watering their plants 3 times as much as they should because they don't know how to do it right. And so really, I think what's been powerful in the last few years, and specifically here in the Valley, is us taking that perspective that our job is to help make it easy for you to do what you want to do. And if we can take that collaborative approach with our customers instead of a top-down command and control, only water on Tuesdays or else you're in big trouble type approach, we can really get a lot more savings, a lot more conservation in a much more durable way that doesn't rely on us having to have those kind of top-down, very negative interactions with customers for the rest of time.
And actually, we have an audience question from Douglas, who stole the next question I was going to ask. So thank you, Douglas. How might our aging water infrastructure affect future water conservation? And I guess I would add to that, infrastructure, as we know, is incredibly important, but I presume it's also quite expensive. So how does all that work together? Max, you're the big dog, but I keep going to you first. I don't know if Lauren or Amanda, you want to jump on that first?
I can talk a little bit. I guess our infrastructure is about 20 years old, so relatively, again, we're starting to see the need to do some replacements and looking at our infrastructure from a repair and maintenance perspective. But there are also some things that we're doing. Our conservation specialist was able to help our water team secure a grant where we're going to be putting in smart hydrants. So we're putting in AI technology in our fire hydrants, and we'll be able to know that distribution system. When are there leaks? Where are there leaks? Is there something going on? We'll be able to respond to that right away. So again, technology-driven, data-driven information that'll help us repair and maintain earlier rather than waiting for a catastrophe to have to fix later.
Lauren, what about Gilbert's infrastructure and how that might affect things?
Yeah, I mean, we're always making sure that we're investing in our infrastructure, replacing and repairing things as they come to their useful life, monitoring, as Amanda said, through technology to monitor for leaks, make sure we're aware of what's going on our system, because a lot of the AMI is showing us leaks on the customer side, right? So we have to monitor for leaks on our side of things. It's all going to be part of just investing and making sure our rates allow what we're getting from our customers to pay for the system, to maintain the system, right? So as far as conservation, we want to be able to invest in that infrastructure so that we're not having big leaks in our main lines, because obviously if there's one of those big lines that breaks, that's going to waste a whole lot more water than, say, an irrigation line. So it's all part of our overall maintenance plan, make sure that we are monitoring and metering our water use on our side as well as on the customer side.
And Max, as I said, obviously this could be expensive, but it's vitally important. How does all that fit with where Phoenix has been going so far as infrastructure that's been around for a while and some of the newer stuff?
And I think this is one of the places where the Valley is really unique in that we have many cities that have simultaneously both very old infrastructure, say from the early 1900s, mid 1900s, stuff that was put in right in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, still operating today. And we also have very, very rapid development happening at the same time. And usually cities kind of have one of those problems or the other. You don't have to deal with both of them simultaneously. One of the things that Arizona did that was incredibly smart in the 1980s is putting a cap on lost and unaccounted for water. So in the active management areas, all of your providers are required to keep their lost and unaccounted for water. So that's all the water from leaks and breaks and fires and everything on Earth under 10%. Now, 10% sounds like a lot to the layperson, right? Man, one out of every 11 drops that goes into this pipe is just disappearing into the ether. But compared to industry standards, in particular, if you go to older systems, that's actually very, very, very low and frankly difficult to comply with. And that's something that as our infrastructure continues to age, it forces us as utilities to continue making those investments in operations, maintenance, and replacement to ensure that we don't have those big leaks that Lauren was discussing earlier that frankly would put us over that regulatory limit. It's really a very unique thing in Arizona that we've invested immense amounts of political capital and physical capital into.
But we know people who live in the desert. I mean, thousands, even millions of folks care about conservation. There's a tiny percentage, though, who may or may not. And I want to ask all three of you, obviously, this one, but Amanda, let me start with you. Do you hear from residents who are not in favor of conservation for whatever reason, and how do you respond to them?
I don't know that we actually really receive a lot of criticism for conservation. Like we just haven't had that big of a problem. And in fact, I'd almost argue that we have the opposite, where it's, why aren't you putting in watering restrictions? Why don't we have time of day or day of week restrictions? Our community is a lot of residents who maybe moved here from outside of Arizona. And so we get, folks coming in from the Midwest who are like, well, this isn't the way my water utility ran. And so it's informing them and educating that Arizona has laid groundwork for decades to manage our water. And so, like Max said earlier, we don't have to be heavy-handed with our conservation practices. We don't have to top-down dictate our conservation. This is really a partnership with the residents, with the customers. And so we haven't seen the, like, why are you doing this? Why are you taking away my lawn? Why are you doing that? Because we haven't had those restrictions. We don't have anything that says you absolutely cannot have, let's say grass in your backyard. But if you do want it, here's how you can manage it. Here's how you can maintain it. Here's how you can water it effectively and efficiently for a desert landscape. And I think that our department and our city, our council, our management, they've all done a wonderful job creating these relationships with our residents. We attend district meetings, we attend council meetings, we know our residents and our customers by name, and we will gladly accept emails and phone calls and in-person conversations about this. And so I think that has helped us immensely not have that criticism.
Lauren, what about you? What sort of feedback do you get? Do you get pro-conservation, ever any anti-conservation?
Yeah, I don't think we get anti-conservation in the sense of like, this doesn't make sense, right? I think a lot of people understand we're in a desert and we must use every drop wisely. I think where the tension comes is you're telling me I should increase my conservation, but you're still allowing new development and new growth in my community, right? So that's kind of where we see that tension for individuals is like, I'm not going to stop watering my lawn every day of the week. You're still letting all this new development happen. And I think that's a really key education piece of how Arizona, how us utilities have to manage our supplies. We have to get 100-year assured water supply to meet demand for our existing residents as well as new development. And that water security is key to our economy, to the reason people want to live here, good jobs, good fun places to go eat out, good fun places to go recreate, right? But also we recognize that, yes, there are issues with the Colorado River. There are things that may come that our supplies we've grown on aren't maybe as reliable as we forecasted prior. And therefore, water conservation helps us maintain our water security, because in those times of shortage, we have to turn to backup supplies. And those backup supplies are our long-term savings, much like a savings account for your personal finances, right? And so if you have a reduced income, you don't want to be depleting your savings account. And so that conservation provides resiliency to the whole community for existing users, future users. It's all part of how we maintain this quality of life here in the desert. And so we focus on, these are the programs we're doing. that education piece, really tying it back to our water security, and the key piece being that all water conservation provides water security for everyone here.
Max?
Yeah, I think to echo what both Amanda and Lauren have said, for every, I don't know, one comment that we get that is anti-conservation, I think we probably get 100 that are very pro-conservation. I certainly see, as Amanda was describing earlier, more folks asking, like, why don't we have more mandatory conservation? Much more often than I see people complaining about our existing conservation measures. I also think Lauren is really right that the place where we do see some of that pushback is in relation to development. And I think that's a really good opportunity for us to have a conversation with that customer about how we've managed water over the long term here in Phoenix. And the fact of the matter is that if you've moved here since 1950 or so, the only reason that you're able to be here is because somebody else conserved for you. That's what Arizonans do. It's what we've been doing for our entire history, right? Is finding more ways to fit more growth and more economic progress, more development into a finite water supply. And fundamentally, you know, if I think about my kids or anything like that, like, what side of that do I want them to be on? The side that says, I've got mine and I don't want anybody else to have it, or how can I help solve this problem moving forward? And that's the conversation that we have with folks. You're here because somebody else conserved with you. You should pay that forward for somebody else to continue coming so that we can all have the quality of life that we want to have.
Max, to some extent you answered this, but you know, I'll invoke the phrase, though I like to spend summers in San Diego as often as I can. We always hear about, don't California my Arizona. How has Arizona, specifically the Valley, avoided some of the restrictions that California had in place that obviously a number of residents there were not necessarily happy about, even if they saw the need? You talk about innovation, you talk about people being conscious about the community where they live, but that isn't always, and you know, we're human, that isn't always the way to do it. How has how have the policies worked so well that people have not necessarily been forced, especially in wake of what we've seen in the Colorado?
Well, I think it's what it really comes down to at the end of the day is a set of values. And a big thing that's been important to me as an Arizonan and a Phoenician throughout my life is personal choice, personal responsibility, and helping understand that fundamentally, I do have responsibilities to my community, but they're done at at the level of me, right? I want to make the choices that allow me to continue to have the best quality of life that I can moving forward. That being said, I think it's been very, very important for us to be able to establish, like, what does it mean to be an Arizonan? What does it mean to be a Phoenician? And at least in my perspective, a really important part of being an Arizonan, a really important part of being a Phoenician is using water responsibly. So when those folks move in and they come to this place, we can sit down and say, like, welcome, we're so happy you're here. Here's what it means to be one of us. And being one of us means that you're going to be responsible with your water. Being one of us means that you're going to take a lot of personal responsibility. There's not going to be somebody knocking on your door to make sure that you're doing that, but we're going to count on you to do it because that's what we all do here.
Lauren, Amanda, do you guys want to pop on that or no? I can move on to another question either way.
Yeah, just a little bit more on the policy side of things. You know, we have just well, our Assured Water Supply Program, the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, it really set up that we get water before growth, right? And that's the policy here in Arizona, is water before growth. And because of that, we have a whole bunch of water security. And that's giving us that resiliency to what's coming on the Colorado River. And it's not that we're hoarding water. That's not what we're doing. The cities aren't hoarding water. We have some reserves in place, but also we have this plan for how we're going to meet demand now and into the future, and how we're going to deal with droughts and cycles of shortage. And that gives us that piece that it's really world renowned. Like no other community, no one else in the world plans for 100 years out. And that's a good time frame, right? 3 mortgages or, you know, your great grandkids. It's not that far ahead. 100 years is not that far ahead. We want to make sure that in 100 years, we still have 100 years of water. So it's that continual planning, that sustainable approach that Arizona has had because of that acknowledgement. We are in the desert. We don't have this coastline to maybe believe that, oh, look at all that water. We don't see that every day. So I think it's just that mindset along with those policies that have been in place.
And Amanda?
Absolutely. I would just echo it's that we have created a culture of understanding we are in an arid climate, that we have a resource, but it's a finite resource, and we're healthy, not wealthy. And we can use that water, save some for the future, use some now. And I think that that's something that resonates with people. You can have a little bit now, but you can also save it for those generations. And I think that people moving to Arizona, or people who live in Arizona and have grown up here, they understand that they want to invest in their community, and they want to make sure that they have a healthy resource for their future generations.
I think that segues well into the idea of education and awareness. Max, as you said, people move here, we sort of let them know, hey, this is how we do things. We're not going to be knocking on your door, personal responsibility. But let me start with you on this. How much more education and awareness is needed? And for each of you, starting with Max, is there a particular program or a series of programs you're proud of the city of Phoenix has that's really helping educate residents?
Well, I think that while we have done a really good job of educating the public, we certainly could always do more. I think that, frankly, instances like this where we're having these conversations and where the media helps us express this message out to the public have been very important, in particular in the summer of 2022 and the winter of going into the early 2023, when conditions were very poor on the Colorado River. We saw an immense amount of media coverage towards that end. That I think really did help us get many of the core messages out in a way that we just can never get the volume turned up quite as loud from our end. I think of all the programs that we have, it's very hard for me to choose among my babies, but that I think the one that we should all maybe be the most proud of actually is Water Use It Wisely. That's a collaborative of many of the water providers throughout the state of Arizona, where they sat down starting in the 1990s and said, like, what are all the things that people need to know about how to use water wisely in their homes? What does it mean to be an Arizonan, a Phoenician, like we were mentioning a moment ago? And how can we help people do that? That program has been around for, 30 years now. It's been incredibly successful at helping people understand just those bare bones basics of what you can do to save water.
Great. Amanda, can I go to you on that? What's an education program you think Surprise is doing really well?
So we are also a member of Water Use It Wisely. I think that has been immensely helpful in our beginnings. And we have kind of recently evolved into standing on our own. And something that is new this year is actually an EPA WaterSense professional certification program that our conservation specialist puts on. It's a qualified water efficient landscaper program, and it certifies irrigation and landscape professionals in irrigation system audits. And it's an in-depth look at how do those water budgets work, how do you effectively and efficiently manage a landscape, and it's targeting the professionals who will have some of the biggest impacts to water conservation on an HOA on those larger landscapes. And so it's not necessarily an HOA board or maybe their program manager who's looking at it, but it's the irrigation professional, the person who is turning the valve on and off, the person who's installing that irrigation timer. And I think that it's a new program, but we're very, very excited. It's something we just started this year, and we've already certified 20 people in the last 6 months or so. And so we're excited to see where it takes us.
Great. And Lauren, what about education in Gilbert? What has stood out to you?
Yeah, I think for Gilbert, so our community, the average age is 36. We have a relatively young community, and our Office of Communications and Engagement, so our digital communications team here in Gilbert has done an amazing job of developing our social media presence, and our teaming with them and our conservation team to get content out there that's fun, that's relevant, that is educational of, hey, it rained half an inch this weekend, turn off your irrigation timer, and doing something fun and quick that's easy to digest, that just gives the resident the tools to get started, just gets their interest peaked enough to where they're going to click on a link and go watch our videos that we've prepared on how to find and fix leaks in your home, learn about how to do a smart controller timer programming, or come to our water conservation workshops. So we find that those social media posts really just get the widespread, like it's a way to go very wide, not necessarily super deep yet, but it just gets that interest out there and get people clicking on our links and engaging more in our programs.
Got a really good level of participation from, oh, Max, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think if you're somebody who's on the webinar today trying to figure out how to save water around your own home, right? Not just to hear about how the cities are broadly trying to help people save water. Amanda, a moment ago said, I think like the single most critical thing, which is that if you have a landscaper who's landscaping your yard, do not assume that they are setting your irrigation timer to be efficiently or reasonably set. As we go around folks' houses, we find that almost everybody is radically overwatering, especially their desert plants. So as a good rule of thumb, if you go out to that little irrigation box on your on the side of your house and you see that anything is watering more than twice a week, you are watering too much. That's how much water grass needs in the summertime, more or less thinking about like desert plants in the winter or anything like that. So please, we love our landscapers. I have a great relationship with mine. But don't let them touch your irrigation box.
Yes, and
Very
my wife
well
would
said.
say, don't let them use your leaf blowers all the time. That's anyway. We've gotten so many good questions from the audience. I want to run through these. Some of these are going to be sort of random, guys, but here we go. Amber says, what about charging residents extra who do not conserve and actually waste water? A lot of people either don't understand or, she asserts, don't care about the water crisis. I'd love to see a forced participation for those people. I suppose we kind of addressed that, but yeah, Lauren, is there something going on there?
I was just going to say that we have, and most of the cities throughout the valley have tiered water rates, right? So you pay a smaller amount for the first bucket of water, and then as your water use gets more and more discretionary, I would say, then you're going to pay more per drop of water as it goes up. And Gilbert has had recent rate increases, and we've increased those top tiers more than the lower tiers. So we're trying to, again, reduce that waste.
And Amanda, can I jump in on that?
Yeah, so I would also say that, we do have a tiered rate system, and that is really the mechanism that we use. We do not want to be policing water use. We do not want to be finger pointing or making someone feel blamed for their water use. But we do have a tiered rate structure, and this past year we did add a fourth tier. So we've kind of leveled those out a little bit. So we do understand that increased water use, and there will be a cost associated with that, but that is at that consumer's kind of discretion.
We hear from Michael. Michael says, are there any jurisdictions addressing swimming pools, either through incentives for removal or requirements that limit size and depth? Any of your cities doing those things?
The only thing that we're doing in Phoenix is a couple summers ago, we adopted what's called the Sustainable Desert City Development Policy. It did a whole number of things. One of the standard stipulations that was included in that policy, however, are limitations or instructed the Planning and Development Department to develop limitations for swimming pools in new developments. So far, we're still in the process of developing that type of policy. I would say in general, frankly, pools are not something that I worry about nearly as much as I worry about grass. And the reason why is that it's pretty hard to overwater a pool. It's very easy to overwater your grass. And as such, in the real world, even though the background, like theoretical water use from grass and pools is very, very similar, in reality, we see people using more water per square foot of grass than they do in their pools.
So that begs the question, because, how could we have a water conversation about conservation without mentioning golf courses? Anyone have anything to say about that? People always complain about that. And Max, that brings up the concept of grass, obviously.
So what I would say is this, that one, golf is obviously a very important part of the Valley's economy. And it is, for the folks who do play that game, it is a very, very important part of their quality of life. I'm not one of them, but I'm told it's a lot of fun. The other thing that I think is important for folks to understand is, what is the total amount of water savings that you could see if we did eliminate golf courses or anything like that? And the fact of the matter is that we use more water outdoors at our single family homes than at every single golf course, business, industry combined in the entire city of Phoenix. So ultimately, removing those golf courses would not have a very significant impact on our overall water demand, because we frankly don't have that many of them. As compared to really just getting folks to water their outdoor landscapes efficiently.
Lauren, I see your mic is on. Did you have any thoughts about the pools or anything like that?
Just about the golf courses.
Please, yeah.
Again, similar to what Max said, but also, water use is part of their bottom line. They're generally irrigating pretty efficiently. We've seen a couple golf courses in Gilbert redo their courses to be more water efficient, and then removing, grass that's not part of the actual play for golf. So we're seeing that that's really been helpful, and they're also regulated by the state on how much water they can use. And then we do have a lot of our golf courses that use reclaimed water. Now, every drop of water matters. So whether you're using potable or reclaimed, we don't want any waste, but we are seeing that, they are also focused on reducing their use because it's part of their, their biggest expense.
And Amanda, as we said, Surprise is a little bit younger. Does Surprise have anything related to pools, golf courses, that kind of thing?
So for golf courses, we do have some retirement communities in our area that have very, very nice golf courses. And like Lauren said, I was just kind of shaking my head because she was saying everything I was thinking at the moment, which is they are regulated by the state. They do have a water allotment that they have to stay within. And we've actually had a lot of engagement with the water managers at the golf courses that say, hey, we have our residents asking us to remove grass or to change things up a little bit. And so really knowing, where do you want that grass? Are there maybe hills or slopes or recreation sites that aren't being totally used? And we're seeing some of those conversions on the golf course where they're keeping the playing fields completely active, but maybe getting rid of some of those inactive areas. And we've seen very proactive steps on their side to maintain their landscapes. And as our golf courses are part of kind of a residential community, it's the residential community who brought that to them and said, we want change and we want water savings. So that's a testament to our citizens and our residents wanting water conservation to be at the forefront of that management. As far as pools go, we don't have any regulations for putting them in or removing them. I know that as new developments come in, we do like to see maybe a community pool put in place so that maybe it allows for those communities to come together in a local space, but kind of ancillary to that, it might reduce the number of pools at an individual home if you have a place to go and you have kind of a central amenity that you can go to.
One more audience question, and this may fall into the category of tech and innovation. What's the status of advanced water purification? How significant could that be to the overall water supply? And I presume, how would that affect conservation measures?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember let's take a step back. So advanced water purification, for folks who don't know, is taking water from our wastewater treatment plants that's already been recycled, is clean enough to be discharged to a stream, like the Salt River is currently in many cases discharged to a stream, and treating that water with an additional step of multiple barriers to make sure that it is as pure, completely pure, and able to be discharged back into our water distribution system to be served to customers. Phoenix is currently, and many Valley cities are exploring advanced water purification. We have our first facility currently under construction right now in the Cave Creek area. We have another facility in planning on the west side of I-17 in the north part of Phoenix, and a very large regional facility that we're working with many partners on at 91st Avenue. What is important about advanced water purification, or the most important element to think about it, is that fundamentally it is water conservation, right? It's making sure that we get the most out of every single drop of water that we have, and that we can make the city run on less of these exterior supplies, right? As climate change continues to drive conditions worse on the Colorado River, worse on the Salt and Verde rivers, that we can do everything that we want to do here on the city with less. And I think that fundamentally is that same ethic of conservation that we've been talking about all along. It's how do we get the most bang out of every drop of water that we possibly can.
So before we go to final statements, I think this will actually, segue well into Terry Goddard when he rejoins us here in a moment. I have this photo, and I think I bring this up anytime I talk about water. This is an old photo. I think it's Mo Udall, Hall Fannin, Carl Hayden, all the old timers of Arizona politics who had an impact in the creation of the Central Arizona Project in part. So we always get into the political question. I'm going to make this as non-political as I can make it, because you're all representing cities, and cities are seen in a different way, obviously, by residents. It's like, we're on the ground, we're in this together. We're not quite as much about the yammering back and forth on opposite sides. Are there obstacles or even potentially positives to how our politics works around water. Does this continue to be something that we talked about collaborating among cities, but are we seeing more elected officials not only being aware of the problem or the challenge, but also being willing to work together to some extent as you realize the problem to say, okay, conservation is a really vital thing. Let's see how we can have statewide effective policies that don't necessarily lean left or right. I don't want to put any pressure on anyone to pick on that one, but before we go to Terry, anybody have thoughts about that?
I'll touch the hot stove. So I think one of the things that Arizona has done very successfully throughout its history is making sure that water did not become a political issue. That fundamentally we all understood that this was a common resource that we had to be able to manage. The extent to which we'll be able to continue doing that moving forward, I think will likely drive how successful we continue to be. As long as we can recognize that fundamentally we are all in this together. Nobody wants to build a house that does not have water someday. Nobody wants to have that conversation with a family someday in the future. And as long as we continue to keep our eye on that ball, that we have a shared common goal of building a thriving, vibrant community instead of communities here in the Valley, I think we're going to be all right.
Terry, let me go to you, and then I want to have each of the panelists give you each just a quick sort of takeaway. But Terry, let me get your final comments on what you think is important and what you think about the conversation we've had today.
Well, let me start with Steve, the last point you made. Arizona has a rich tradition of water conservation. I think we heard some great examples of that today, and it's been nonpartisan. I remember as a kid, as a college student, I got to go to some of the hearings on the CAP, and it was John Rhodes and Morris K. Udall that were leading the fight, one from each party, political opponents in many sense, but on water, absolutely together, and they delivered for Arizona, and we need that spirit to continue. I just want to thank Lauren and Amanda and Max for their professionalism and frankly their inspirational words today. But they're not unique. Arizona municipalities have some extraordinary water professionals, and these three are great examples. And I want to particularly shout out the city of Surprise, which has, I think, set as a new city its standards very high and has it needs to be commended because they're trying to do it right from the beginning. And Lauren made a point that I think I'd like to close on. It's water resiliency is what we need to be all about. Conservation is part of it. It's a big part of it. It's what we as individuals can do. Municipalities are doing the recycling, as Max talked about. That's a lot of money, and that needs to be done by the big government system. And we at CAP are trying to make sure that we have a renewable supply coming from the Colorado River and groundwater that is properly conserved. And tomorrow we're kicking off a new water education center at the Central Arizona Project that we hope will be inspiring and a place that kids and adults can come and learn more about water, because you can't know too much about Arizona's water.
All right. Terry Goddard, CIP Board President, thank you very much. And we've got a little bit of time, say 30 seconds for each of you, just a takeaway. Lauren, let me start with you. What's a takeaway from folks who didn't get to hear the whole conversation? What do you want them to be thinking about when it comes to water conservation?
I would just say, be aware of what you're using outdoors. Take the time to go out, check out your irrigation system. I think most people who live here, wherever you live, whether you're in an apartment or a single family home, townhome, find out how water is used and educate yourself and find the tools. Go on the website of whatever city you're in. There's so much out there to learn, and always feel free to reach out, because there's so many professionals out there who want to help you.
And Amanda, what about you? What's a takeaway?
Absolutely. So we as a city, we're here to serve you as residents. We're here to serve you as water customers. And we want you to know that whatever it is you want in your landscape, we can help you get there with desert adapted plants, with landscape methods that will provide you a happy, wonderful lifestyle. And we hope that you will reach out to us with any questions.
Max, you get to wrap it up.
Well, I think Lauren and Amanda said the most important things from the true conservation perspective. So I just will reflect for a moment on how incredibly thankful and impressed I am by my co-panelists. I think, I said the other day at a different meeting that fundamentally Arizona has the right people in the right places at the right times to solve what are going to be very, very challenging issues. And I'm just incredibly thankful for the series of professionals we have around us today to work on these things.
That brings to a close this Arizona Capital Times Morning Scoop, Saving Water, Securing the Future, City Conservation Efforts. Once again, our panelists, Terry Goddard, CAP Board President, Max Wilson, City of Phoenix Water Resources Management Advisor, Lauren Hickson, Town of Gilbert Water Resources Manager, and Amanda Lacey, City of Surprise Water Resources Supervisor. I'm Steve Goldstein. Thanks so much for joining us this morning for This Morning Scoop.